I felt to do this live video today about how important it is to acknowledge the power of the sacred and bow to it. Otherwise, we suffer. And it feels particularly timely to speak about this, given that the sun moved into Aries a few days ago on Monday. And Aries is the sign of the child and the warrior. It's very headstrong, you know. And if we try to push through with our will and ignore what's coming up, then we create untold suffering for ourselves. And this is a lesson I've had to relearn many times. And again, it seems this week. How humbling. So, yeah, I wanted to just share, you know, we just had the full moon last Friday in Virgo, which is the sign of the sacred vessel, okay, the priest, the priestess, the grail. And we're all here to become a living embodiment of the grail, okay, the vessel, to be the eyes, the ears, the hands, the mouth of the divine, to be the divine instrument and to be used by highest intelligence, which is loving wisdom, in service to the greater good. So when we traverse through a full moon, there's a 3-day vortice, just like a new moon has a 3-day vortice, and it literally stirs everything up, everything that's been sitting in the subconscious that, you know, we've perhaps been too busy to deal with, preferring to focus on our to-do list rather than acknowledging, hey, there's stuff surfacing in my soul, my inner self, that's needing me to hold space and explore it and allow it to come up and through me so I can shift. And we also had the equinox on Monday. It was exact. And again, this has a 3-day vortice, a portal, you know, it's like a whirligig, a centrifugal force that brings up stuff. So for those that were in the northern hemisphere, it was the spring equinox, a time of birthing. And for those in the southern hemisphere, like myself, it was a time of dying. Yes, the autumn equinox, fun times, known as the Black Wedding in the Tantric tradition. So it's a time of big humbling. And for me, that played out. I went to a flood relief devotional chanting event that was held locally. And it was to raise money for all the people affected by the floods. Well, not all, but, you know, those the hardest hit. And you know, similar to any active meditation, whether it's breath work, dance, self-pleasure or sex or chanting, when we open up our devotional heart and ask that the divine move through us through the sacred practice, our prayers are answered. And I always do this before any active meditation. And what happened, as it happened before, this grief came through. In fact, the grief that came through me was so big. It was like a tsunami of grief. And it was so loud, the noise that was coming through me. The audience was looking at me because it was louder than the amplified band on stage. So, but when you're in the energy, you can't stop it. And for me, it's very strong because my Kundalini awakened 26 years ago, and through, at that time, dedicating myself to be of service to anchor heaven on earth, when we make that commitment, then our instrument is activated. And so having done the Grail practices, the descent journeys down to the center of the earth with my moon time every month, and with through the darker months doing the descent of the 13 moons and descent of Inanna, Ishtar, with my students, it's like every time you get initiated, you strengthen your connection with the bioelectricity of the earth, which is Kundalini, known as serpent power or dragon power. And that's because the energy that animates the earth, that creates the storms, that creates fertility and abundance, is the energy of the dragon lines, the meridians that are literally the life force of our mother planet. So I was being ridden by the dragon, by this energy, and it was coming through me. It certainly felt like personal grief. It could have also been collective grief. Often, once we open up that channel, we can be a valve for the collective in group spaces. If you're the person that often dissolves into tears, And in my Red Tent course, I speak about how anyone that plays that role in a group is honored, okay, because it's, it's a big service to the collective. Anyway, once that grief had come out, then the energy, boom, went straight away to the other polarity, which was bliss and ecstasy. And I became instantly this is in front of a crowd of about 150 people. Anyway, and again, the dragon energy was riding me so strong. I was literally holding onto the chair and just writhing in ecstasy. Feels good, sure, but So the 2 days later, I went to a dance meditation. It was like, oh, my body is holding more grief. I've got to get this out because there's been so much trauma that I journeyed in the last 2 years with. It was about 280 days in lockdown and then 8 months of homelessness and then losing most of my things in the flood and losing the relationship with my son. So a lot to process. And again, the grief came out. And, a relief to get it out. And then and again, I went to the other polarity. Once that wave of grief was spent, I was in ecstasy and bliss. And then I thought, okay, Monday, we start work. Park the process until I've got my time again. No. Being within 3 days of an equinox, that energy is coming through, regardless of whatever schedule our mind thinks it has to adhere to. So what happened was this energy was coming up as constriction in my neck and head. Interesting, we've got dogs barking in the background. And I started getting head cold symptoms because of all the tightness. Literally, I was being a pain in the neck. I was being caught between my head and my heart. My heart needed just the space to go in deep and process what was coming up. And my head was like, no, you've got all these work commitments, you've got to keep going. So I was trying to push through. And that's what Aries does. Yeah, Aries governs the head. And we end up with a headache. We end up with a head cold if we try and push through and impose our will on the bigger force, which is the sacred, which is the life force, the force, which is wanting to move through us. So I got to the point where I had to bow to my body and say, I'm feeling too ill to work. I just had to close the laptop, tell my team I'm not available, and just lie down. Fortunately, I had an osteo session, and the cranio work that he did unlocked the holding pattern in my neck. And so all the congestion could drain. And by morning, all head cold symptoms completely gone. And I said, right, I'm not going to push through. I'm going to give myself a day to just be. And I got in the bath, stayed there for 2 hours, started sobbing, didn't stop sobbing all day. I journaled, I pulled cards, sobbed through all of it, lay in the hammock, sobbed. And it was just like, okay, you've been through a flood. What's that going to bring up? A flood of emotion, grief. And you hadn't given it space because I didn't have a sacred space to hold me. And fortunately, I was given a house sit this week, and it's a sacred space, a space that has many reminders, almost identical things of the things that I'd lost in the floods, and even before that, in losing my sacred space, the temple space that held me. And without a temple space, you know, I mean, I moved 3 times just in the last week. It's just been a hurly-burly, and it's very hard to maintain your center and maintain your practices when you don't even have room to do a yoga asana. So I just wanted to share, if you've been feeling the intensity of the recent full moon and the equinox, know that you're not alone. We are all becoming more sensitive to the vortices of the full moons, the new moons, the sun moving into each solar month on the wheel, and the equinoxes, the cross-quarter festivals, the eclipses. All of these are initiating us. And it's hard enough to journey them when you're aware of the process. Whereas when you're not even aware that, oh, this is going to pass in just a couple of days, but the intensity is really overwhelming right now, but I have to surrender to it and know that you've got support. And the thing is, men and women journey these vortices differently. And I know these days there's a sort of a narrative that's pushing us to become gender neutral, okay? To not journey deeply into what it is to be a man and a woman, so that we can balance these polarities within ourselves and create the inner marriage. But in a sense, to disassociate from gender and to think that that's being ever so spiritual and above, you know, locking ourselves into identification with a gender. And the thing is that we're all masculine and feminine, but we have to heal the foundation gender that our soul chose to incarnate into. It said, right, this is the one that is probably the most wounded, the most uncomfortable. And so you're going to inhabit it physically to make sure that you feel and heal the wounds of that gender polarity. And so the practices of the 13 moons for women, the 12 suns for men, these are an opportunity to heal the wounds as the moon for women brings up what's unhealed in our feminine psyche, our feminine expression during her darkest phase, the 3 days over the dark moon. And for the men doing the 12 suns practice, when the sun shifts into a new sign, boom, it initiates you into the next stage of your hero's journey. The fears and the self-doubts, the negative stories of the inner critic, the dark father that you've internalized that sabotages you from being the light, from manifesting the dream that lives in your heart. So these are ancient Grail practices. The Grail was the wisdom of the cycles. And it was said that in the ancient world, if, you know, men and women didn't seek the Grail, that the world would become a wasteland. And that is what's happened. Without the Grail practices, since the Roman Empire outlawed them. So today I just share from my experience, and as a final kind of call to adventure, if you feel to call to journey consciously the descent of the lunar and solar paths that initiate us to heal our feminine and masculine expression. And I will put the links into the post. There's just 24 hours left for the men if you're feeling called to journey with me in the 12 Suns. I've already extended registrations for a week. We've currently got 7 men and we need 3 more for the course to run. It is open to men as young as 15. And so this is an opportunity for men of all generations to sit together in sacred circle. We do it online and have support and materials online to support their journey around those 12 initiations. For the women, the 13 Moons is open for another week. We start in exactly a week, so actually it's open for 6 more days. And yeah, that's an opportunity to do a deep dive into the shadow that's being brought up when the moon moves into the new moon in each of the zodiac signs. So this is a way that we can become whole, which is wholly healed. So in terms of a time commitment, it's not that much. It's each month, probably an hour online, going through the materials, short video tutorials and self-examination, self-reflection questionnaire, and then a 2-hour live online circle once a month at the time when you most need it, when the stuff's coming up. So yeah, really 3 hours a month, not a huge time commitment, and I've kept the pricing as accessible as possible. So if it calls to you, check it out and know that there is support to journey the intensity of these vortices that initiate us. So wherever you are in the world, if you've got a headache, if you've got a head cold, trust me, unplug. It's a sign to really go within and go, okay, what's coming up? Because, you know, our sacred tears, our grief, our sacred waters, when we allow that to flow, like standing under a waterfall, we become more crystalline, we become clearer, able to access insights. Today I feel reset, reborn, and I pulled the card rebirth, and I had the herald of bats flying over, heralding this rebirth was at hand before the descent began. So, you know, this is happening whether we want to acknowledge it or not. So to give ourselves that acknowledgement means we can access the support that we need to go through this incredible evolutionary transformation that we're all being put through. So thanks for listening, and I hope my words resonated and yeah, were of some help to you today. All right, I'll put the links up so that if you're interested in that, you can find them. All right, blessings everyone.